Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 87. We're going to talk about Full Eclipse from 1993. I rented this from Scarecrow Video. I had not seen this before. As always, we begin with the prominent crew and cast. This film was directed by Anthony Hickok, written by Richard Christian Matheson and Michael Reeves, with effects makeup by Tony Gardner and the Altarian Creature crew. Anthony Hickok, known as Tony, started as a club promoter in London in the early 80s. Tony reportedly got his break when he crashed into the back of producer Stefan Arenberg's car. Tony talked Stefan into letting him pay for the damage by writing him a script for only $3,000. Stefan agreed, but wouldn't pay until it was delivered. Tony wrote Waxwork in 3 days. And we will talk about Waxwork. Richard Christian Matheson is the son of fiction writer and screenwriter Richard Matheson, who we saw before as the writer of Scream of the Wolf in 1974. I couldn't find any biographical details for Michael Reeves, but I was really impressed by his credit list. A specific high point for me is he wrote Batman Mask of the Phantasm in 1993 and also won an Emmy in 93 for his work on Batman the Animated Series. Tony Gardner began his film career working on Michael Jackson's Thriller under the auspices of Rick Baker. His attention to detail and realism has apparently led to investigations launched by the FBI, the LAPD, and the Arizona State Police, as people felt like the effects were too real to be fake. The detail in Danny Boyle's film, 127 Hours, reportedly led to halted screenings and audience members passing out. He founded his own effects company, the Altarian Creature Crew, whose work we're seeing here. The cast includes Mario Van Peebles as Max Dyer, Pansy Kensit as Casey Spencer, Bruce Payne as Adam Garou, and Tony Dennison as Jim Sheldon, billed as Anthony John Dennison. Now, Mario Van Peebles is the son of noted early blaxploitation filmmaker Melvin Van Peebles. He got his start acting before making his directorial debut with New Jack City in 1991. Unlike a lot of actors who move into directing, Mario has continued to act quite a bit. Patsy Kensit started acting at the tender age of 4. She's still acting today. Bruce Payne is a Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts trained actor whose filmography should soon break the 100-role mark. He's specialized in playing sophisticated and malevolent villains. Tony Dennison has a lot of film roles, but he's probably done more television. He's best known for his role as Lieutenant Andy Flynn in The Closer from 2005 to 2012, and its spin-off Major Crimes from 2012 to 2018. This film is an exhilarating exercise in cinematic excess. It epitomizes the so bad it's good genre, reveling in absurdity. The narrative defies logic, and the special effects are groundbreakingly subpar, a topic that we'll revisit later. Yet its enthusiasm is infectiously captivating. It seizes every trope and amplifies it, soaring so far beyond conventional boundaries that moderation becomes a distant memory. Subtlety and restraint are foreign concepts here. Nuance is sacrificed at the altar of bombast. For better or worse, this movie presents a brazen, unapologetic spectacle where every emotion, motivation, and plot point is writ large across the screen. I recommend it, but understand what you're getting. So now let's cover the synopsis. Hey guys, did you know that crime occurs in the inner city? I'm shocked. LA detective Jim Sheldon says he's getting married, retiring, and he's too old for this shit in the first scene as he and his partner Max Dyer arrive at a violent hostage situation. He is a dead man with a lucky silver dollar. Max goes action movie hero with 2 pistols, takes out all 3 bad guys in a lot of gunfire. Oh, turns out Jim isn't dead yet. He's just on life support. Max's wife of 2 years, Liza, accuses him of bringing his work home. Someone injects something mysterious into Jim's IV, and he miraculously recovers. The gun safety in this movie is horrible. Max and Jim witness a drive-by shooting, and Jim goes all superhero, running along the top of moving cars in traffic and making Bionic Man-type leaps as he kills all the gang members violently. He takes about a half dozen bullets and crashes the final thug's bike into a fiery explosion that he just walks away from. That injection was something special. Adam Garou, a high-ranking officer, invites Max to join a regular meeting with other police officers who are experiencing difficulties in their career. Though Max is skeptical as to what benefit he will derive from this meeting, he reluctantly attends, where he meets other police officers such as the attractive Casey Spencer. Everyone Max meets praises the impact Garou's influence has had on their fortunes. Jim melts down his lucky silver dollar and commits suicide by shooting himself in the head at the meeting. Max realizes Garou's group undertakes vigilante missions, cleaning the streets of criminals. One group member, Doug, turns out to be the one who injected Jim. Each group member injects themselves with this strange chemical, which Garou supplies. Adam isn't just a cop, he's a scientist too. After they inject this chemical, Garou and his team become incredibly powerful and seemingly impervious to injury. The next day, Max attempts to advise his incredulous boss of the strange going-ons, but his boss has no interest in it. The group is this weird, tight-knit pack of loose cannons, if that makes any sense. Casey flirts with Max while they watch wolves at the zoo. After some gratuitous dead body nudity at the morgue, Max has the coroner pull the slug from Jim's brain. That's when Max learns Jim made the bullet he killed himself with. Casey seduces Max and then shoots him. Ugh. She injects him as he lies bleeding and the drug heals him. Convinced, he begins participating in the vigilante missions. He and Casey turn into monsters and bust a whole crack house with extreme prejudice. A local drug kingpin is tired of Garou and his team and decides to kill the lot. Garou hints he's cleaned up crime and gangs in Dallas, Miami, and Detroit. Garou gets all alpha jealous that Casey had sex with Max. And just in case you weren't sure that Garou is the bad guy, he forces Casey to have sex with him. Max gets confirmation that Silver hurts his kind at his surprise 30th birthday party. Liza shows up and Max gets violent. The vigilante cop Werewolf Pac-Man, that is a mouthful, shows up and low-key kidnaps Max for a mission. Oh, turns out Garou was born in France, even though he has no French accent. The crime boss henchmen blow the Pac's van sky high. It doesn't hurt the Pac, and the hitmen die. The VCWP literally toss the bodies out of the police helicopter onto the Kingpin's mansion. Max meets a deformed ex-police officer from Miami in a holding cell who used to work with Garou. The ex-officer warns Max that after the streets are cleaned up of crime, the officers who work with Garou are killed, though he escaped. He's here to kill Garou. He explains his deformity is caused by an overuse of the chemical. Garou shows up and puts him down, I guess with a silver bullet. Max does some cyber sleuthing, tracks Garou back to the early 20th century. Always a cop, always taking out monsters and criminals. Max subsequently finds Garou extracting the chemical from his own brain with a syringe and realizes that he is a full werewolf. Max and the Pac are injecting themselves with Garou's brain juice. Garou monologues that he has become more than a werewolf thanks to drugs and yoga. Now, Garou kills one member of the Pac. Casey and Max escape together and get to the beach so that Garou can't track them by scent. Max juices up and heads out to face Garou and the two remaining VCWP. Max has the coroner mix up a cocktail of silver nitrate and other dangerous drugs. Max finds Garou after they've killed a bunch of mafia. Max's silver bullet doesn't do anything since it's a full eclipse, and that protects Garou from everything. Garou kills the other two VCWP and then comes after Max. Max avoids Garou until the eclipse passes, and then he injects Garou with his werewolf-killing juice. The fight's over. A dying Garou tells Max how he can become a full werewolf now and continue his work. Denver, 3 years later. Max is back with his wife. Max's saliva heals his wife's cut finger, implying Max is the new top werewolf cop. Max counts down the days until the next full eclipse. This might be the earliest computer-generated werewolf transformation seen in film. At this point, there are only 9 other films in contention. I'll keep my eye on that. But it's probably the worst computer-generated transformation scene. I cannot imagine a worse one. It is a super early example of a morph technique where a computer transforms one image into another by matching key points in the 2 images and distorting the images while applying a dissolve. Despite being relatively new technology in 1993, that's no excuse for how amateurish the effect looks here. Willow from 1998, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and Michael Jackson's black and white music video, both from 1991, all demonstrated more polished morphing effects years before this movie came out. I'm not one of those practical effects purists who insist that CGI is always bad. I appreciate CGI in movies, and I know we'll talk more about CGI in werewolf movies in the future. However, this particular era saw multiple experimental and often underwhelming attempts at CGI implementation. While practical effects possess an inherent physicality and impact that CGI struggles to replicate, digital techniques have since evolved significantly. In retrospect, this scene represents a necessary step in the evolution of visual effects. Someone had to be among the first to test and implement these new processes, paving the way for future improvements. With regards to werewolf lore, there are several topics to cover. Let's start with Adam Garou as the original werewolf. We know he's French by birth. We don't know if he was born a lycanthrope or became one. We know he's at least a century old. We know he can pass along his condition, since he does exactly that after the climactic fight with Max. He hints that he used to be more like a traditional werewolf, a bloodthirsty, mindless killer controlled by the full moon. Throughout his long life, he's gained complete control over his transformations. He's studied his biology and learned about the human physiological reactions to his unique chemistry. He's learned about the effects of the total lunar eclipse. This is a new twist. The titular full eclipse grants temporary invulnerability. I do wish they'd done more with this. The totality of a lunar eclipse, the part where the moon is in the deepest shadow of the earth, can last up to 100 minutes, not the few minutes the film shows. You could do a whole movie sequel set during the totality and really ramp up the terror. A protagonist has faced and beaten one werewolf. They think they know how to defeat a werewolf. Then they find out they were wrong. Finally, we need to discuss the werewolf brain juice. The junior werewolf cadets were a cool concept that didn't get enough attention. I didn't like the intermediate look. The claws came out of a weird spot on the first finger joint. I get why they still needed to be able to shoot a gun, but other than that, they're just have resting bitch face and longer canine teeth. I wasn't a fan. Moving on to themes that this movie covers. The concept of extrajudicial vigilante cops is a prominent theme in Full Eclipse, echoing a trend that dominated action cinema in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The film directly references iconic vigilante cop characters, notably Charles Bronson and Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry, whose famous Make My Day line is paraphrased here. The 90s saw a huge surge in films featuring law enforcement officers operating outside legal boundaries to achieve justice. This archetype resonated with audiences, reflecting societal concerns about crime and frustrations with perceived shortcomings in the justice system. The Lethal Weapon franchise, spanning from the late 80s through the 90s, exemplifies this trend, with Mel Gibson's Martin Riggs often employing unorthodox and sometimes illegal methods to apprehend criminals. These films typically depicted a world where conventional law enforcement was ineffective against cunning criminals or a corrupt system, necessitating extreme measures by noble anti-heroes to maintain order. This narrative device allowed filmmakers to critique social issues while delivering action-packed entertainment. The vigilante cop characters often grappled with internal personal demons, adding depth to their roles and exploring themes of moral ambiguity. Critics argued that such depictions glorified police brutality and extrajudicial violence, while supporters viewed them as cathartic fantasies that were distinct from reality. This controversy highlighted the complex relationship between media representation and public perception of law enforcement. By incorporating this theme, Full Eclipse positions itself within a broader cinematic tradition, inviting viewers to consider the implications of justice pursued outside the confines of the law. The film's supernatural twist on the vigilante cop archetype adds a fresh dimension to these familiar themes, allowing for a new exploration of power, responsibility, and the line between heroism and villainy. Additionally, making both the protagonist and antagonist into cops acknowledges the complex nature of this discussion. Now, most werewolf movies are horror films. This film is not a horror movie. We've seen a few werewolf movies that are actually comedies. This film is not a comedy. I feel like this is one of the first Hollywood werewolf action films in history, if not the first. We have seen versions of this kind of film in Mexican cinema to this point, with luchador movies like Santo and Blue Demon versus Dracula and the Wolfman from 1973, or pulp adventures like The Rider of the Skulls in 1965. So let's talk about action movies. An action movie is defined by several key characteristics. Action films are known for fast-paced, adrenaline-pumping scenes, often including chases, fights, and explosions. These films frequently showcase elaborate stunts and visual effects to enhance the spectacle of the action sequences. The actors often perform demanding physical feats, and their character's physical prowess is usually central to the story. The main character possesses exceptional skills or abilities and faces significant challenges or threats. Action movies typically have a well-defined villain or opposing force the hero must overcome. The plot often involves significant danger, either to the protagonist, other characters, or often even the world at large. Action movies tend to have a quick tempo, with events moving rapidly from one scene to the next. While there can be exceptions, many action films have straightforward narratives that prioritize excitement over complex storytelling. Action can be combined with other genres like sci-fi, comedy, or thriller, but the action elements remain prominent. These elements come together to create films that prioritize excitement, tension, and spectacle, aiming to keep audiences on the edge of their seats throughout the viewing. I feel Full Eclipse perfectly reflects these elements. In contrast, Horror movies are characterized by several key elements working together to create a sense of fear, dread, or unease in the audience. They use lighting, darkness, shadows, sound, and cinematography to create a tense, eerie, or unsettled mood. Sudden, shocking moments are designed to startle the audience. Pacing and escalating threats increase anxiety throughout the film. They often feature a monster, supernatural entity, or human villain posing as a severe threat to the characters. Many horror films include graphic depictions of violence or bodily harm, though this isn't universal to the genre. Horror can explore deep-seated fears, taboos, or disturbing psychological concepts, and often incorporates elements defying rational explanation. Many horror plots revolve around characters trying to survive against overwhelming odds while cut off from help or placed in isolated settings. They can turn everyday objects or situations into sources of fear. Horror often reflects or comments on broader cultural anxieties. The intensity and focus of these elements can vary greatly between different styles of horror films. This diverse genre can overlap with others like thriller, science fiction, or drama. Now, you'll notice that horror and action do not list each other as genres they blend well with. That's not to say it can't be done. I would contend that Aliens from 1986 is an action horror film, but making one is hard, and Full Eclipse definitely leans towards the action side. There are plenty of gunfights, shootouts, chases, and explosions. Very little in the way of fear or uncertainty. While the werewolf is a supernatural creature, this film goes out of its way to make the VCWP feel science fiction and not supernatural. I expect we'll continue to see more werewolf movies in this genre going forward. Moving on, Full Eclipse cleverly uses its science fiction premise to explore themes of drug use and addiction. The film's central plot device, a serum that transforms cops into powerful werewolf-like creatures, serves as a metaphor for drug use, operating on several levels. The serum's effects mirror those of performance-enhancing drugs or stimulants. It grants users superhuman strength, speed, and healing abilities, along with built-in weapons like claws and fangs. This enhancement reflects how some individuals turn to drugs to improve their physical or mental capabilities. The dramatic physical transformations visually represent how prolonged use can alter a person's appearance and demeanor. Now, Max's internal struggle over whether to use the serum parallels the difficult choices faced by individuals confronted with drug use, especially in high-pressure environments. This conflict highlights the temptation and decision-making process inherent in drug culture. As characters use the serum more frequently, they struggle to control their animalistic urges and violent tendencies. This loss of self-control mirrors how drug addiction can lead to destructive behavior. The film also explores how the enhanced officer's actions affect the broader community, reflecting societal concerns about the actions of drug use and addiction. The movie explicitly references anti-drug rhetoric, cementing its intention to comment on drug use. 3 specific moments stand out. When Casey first offers Max the serum, she jokes, "The first one's free, but the next will cost you," echoing the stereotypical drug dealer's strategy of getting targets hooked by any means available. Second, before his first mission, Max references Nancy Reagan's anti-drug campaign by saying, "I'm just going to say no." Third, when Guru confirms that his cerebral fluid is the serum's source, he paraphrases a famous anti-drug PSA, "This is my brain, this is you on my brain, any questions?" The film also explores the long-term consequences of drug use. While the serum initially seems beneficial, negative effects reveal themselves over time, mirroring how some drugs can have hidden long-term impacts on users. By using werewolf-like transformations as a stand-in for drug-induced states, Full Eclipse creates a heightened sense of both the empowerment and self-destruction that drugs offer. This science fiction approach allows for a more dramatic and visceral representation of the dangers and allure of drug use than a straightforward, realistic portrayal might achieve. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan on discussing another Hitchcock film, Waxworks from 1987. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bullet in the chamber, and we'll see you back next episode.